What would you do if the woman you trusted with your life was spending every night somewhere else, and your own son was the one who found out? Imagine kissing your wife goodbye as she heads to another night shift at the hospital, only to discover she switched to day shifts 6 months ago and never told you. The nights she claimed to be saving lives in the emergency room, she was spending in another man's apartment across town. This is the story of how my 19-year-old son accidentally uncovered the truth, and how I rebuilt my life from the wreckage of a 21-year marriage built on a foundation of lies. I need to start at the beginning, because for 21 years I believed I had a good marriage, and I need you to understand how real that belief was before I tell you how completely it was destroyed. My name is Jesse Caldwell. I am 44 years old, and I work as an electrician for Donovan Construction, a mid-sized general contractor based out of an office on Longview Avenue in Mansfield, Ohio. I have been pulling wire and bending conduit since I was 22 years old, starting as a fresh apprentice who could barely tell a 14 gauge from a 12 gauge, and working my way up over 2 decades to a journeyman card, and eventually a crew lead position that pays me $57,000 a year before taxes. It is honest, physical work, and when I come home at the end of the day, my hands are calloused, and my lower back aches, and my boots leave dust on the mat by the front door. I have never once complained about the work, because it put a roof over our heads, it kept the lights on, it paid for braces and baseball uniforms and birthday parties, and it made me feel like I was doing right by the people I loved. That feeling of doing right, that sense that I was holding up my end of the bargain, was everything to me. My wife Robin and I met in the summer of 2003 at a 4th of July cookout held at Kingwood Center Gardens, that big old estate on Park Avenue West with the gardens and the peacocks. She was 20 years old and finishing her nursing prerequisites at North Central State College, working part-time at a Subway on Lexington Avenue to pay for textbooks and gas. I was 23 with grease under my fingernails, a 2-year-old truck payment, and an apprentice electrician's salary that barely covered rent on a 1-bedroom apartment on Sturgis Avenue. A mutual friend named Craig Howell introduced us by the cooler where the drinks were, and Robin had this laugh that carried across the whole park, this full-body laugh that made everyone within 50 feet smile, whether they knew the joke or not. I remember thinking that I wanted to be the reason she laughed like that for the rest of her life. We talked for 3 hours that night, sitting on a bench near the rose garden, and by the time the fireworks started, I already knew I was going to marry her. We dated for 14 months and were married in October of 2004 at a small ceremony at First Christian Church on Park Avenue West, with 40 guests and a reception in the church fellowship hall that cost us $1,800 total. Our son Caleb came along in June of 2007, born at Med Central Health, now Ohio Health Mansfield, at 6:15 in the morning after Robin was in labor for 11 hours. I held that boy in the delivery room and made him the same promise every new father makes, that I would protect him, provide for him, and never let him down. Robin became a registered nurse in 2006, and by 2009, she had landed a coveted position in the emergency room at Ohio Health Mansfield Hospital on Glessner Avenue. She loved the adrenaline of emergency medicine, the unpredictability of it, the feeling that every single shift she might save someone's life or lose someone and have to carry that weight. I admired her for it. The ER is a 24-hour operation, and Robin's schedule rotated between days and nights for years, but starting around 2019, she moved permanently to the night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 or sometimes 4 nights a week. She told me nights paid a shift differential of $3.40 an hour, which added up to roughly $4,000 extra dollars per year on top of her base salary of $62,000. I never questioned it. The money showed up in our joint account at Mechanics Bank. She left the house every evening around 6:15, and she came home every morning around 7:30, looking tired and sometimes emotionally drained from the cases she described over breakfast. For years, that was our rhythm, and I want you to understand how settled and comfortable that rhythm was, because comfort is what made the deception possible. Every evening, Robin would shower around 5, put on clean scrubs. She kept a rotation of 4 sets, 2 navy blue and 2 seal blue, and pack a meal in her insulated lunch bag, usually leftovers from dinner or a salad she had prepped that afternoon. She would kiss me on the cheek in the kitchen, say something like, "Don't wait up," or "Hope it's a quiet night," and drive away in her silver 2021 Honda CR-V. I would watch television, maybe do some work in the garage, go to bed by 10. In the morning, I would get up at 5, make breakfast, eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee, which Robin liked and which I had been making for her for years, and have it ready when she walked in the door. She would eat slowly, sometimes tell me about a car accident victim or a child with a high fever or a heart attack patient they had managed to stabilize, and then she would go to bed in the darkened bedroom while I left for the construction site at 6:30. It was routine. It was predictable. It was, I thought, the infrastructure of a solid marriage, as reliable and steady as the wiring I installed in other people's buildings. I had no idea that the entire thing was a performance, and I was the only one in the audience. Caleb graduated from Mansfield Senior High in May of 2025 and enrolled at North Central State College for the fall semester, planning to study health sciences with an eye toward nursing or physician assistant work. That summer, he picked up a part-time job as an orderly at Ohio Health Mansfield, the same hospital where Robin worked. He started in early August, earning $14 an hour for pushing wheelchairs, transporting lab specimens, helping nurses reposition and transfer patients, and doing the 100 other unglamorous tasks that keep a hospital running. He mostly worked day shifts and occasional evenings, assigned to the medical surgical floor on the second level, which was separate from the ER where Robin worked her night shifts. I was proud of him. He was following his mother's path into healthcare, and I thought the hospital connection would be valuable. Robin could keep an eye on him, introduce him to doctors and nurses who might mentor him, help him figure out whether medicine was really his calling. What I did not know, what I could not have predicted, was that Caleb working at that hospital would be the single event that shattered everything I believed about my wife and my marriage. It happened on a Tuesday in late September of 25. Caleb had been asked to cover a morning shift for another orderly named Jerome, who had called in sick with a stomach bug, and the shift was in the emergency department, a floor Caleb did not normally work. He told me the story later, sitting across from me in the garage, and he told it carefully, in order, the way someone recounts an event they know will change things forever. He said he had reported to the ER nursing station at 6:50 a.m. and was looking at the staff rotation board, the big whiteboard near the break room that lists which nurses, techs, and support staff are assigned to which shifts for the coming weeks. He was checking to see which nurses he would be working with that day, trying to figure out the dynamics of an unfamiliar floor. And then he saw something that stopped him. His mother's name was on the day roster. Not the night roster, the day roster. Robin Caldwell, RN, assigned to the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. day rotation. Caleb said he stared at it for a long time, thinking there was a mistake, maybe an old schedule that hadn't been updated. But it was not a single entry. The rotation showed Robin Caldwell assigned to day shifts going back to March of 25, more than 6 full months. Caleb told me that his first reaction was confusion, not suspicion. He thought maybe his mother had switched shifts and simply had not mentioned it, though that seemed like an extremely strange thing to forget to tell your husband and son. Why would you hide a schedule change? He said he stood there for probably 2 minutes, reading and rereading the board, before a charge nurse named Patrice walked by and asked if he needed help finding something. Caleb, thinking on his feet, said casually that he was just looking at the rotation because he thought his mom worked nights. Patrice said, "Oh, Robin? No, she's been on days since March. She requested the transfer back in February." Caleb thanked her and walked away. He finished his 8-hour shift in a daze, transporting patients and restocking supply carts with his hands on autopilot while his mind raced through the implications of what he had learned. His mother had requested a transfer to day shifts in February. It had been effective since March. That meant for 6 months, every single evening when Robin kissed us goodbye, drove away in her scrubs, and supposedly spent 12 hours in the emergency room, she had not been at the hospital at all. She had been somewhere else, doing something else. And she had come home every morning and eaten the breakfast I made her and lied to both of us without blinking. That evening, around 7:30, Caleb came to me in the garage while I was organizing my toolbox after a long day running conduit at a new retail build on North Main Street. He had a look on his face that I had never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, but a kind of careful blankness, like he was trying very hard to control whatever was happening behind his eyes. He closed the garage door and said, "Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you react." My stomach dropped instantly. When your 19-year-old kid starts a conversation like that, your mind goes to the worst possible places. Drugs, a car accident, a girl who's pregnant, trouble with the law. Caleb sat down on the old folding chair by the workbench and told me, steadily and completely, what he had seen on the rotation board. He told me that his mother's name had been on day shifts since March. He told me what the charge nurse Patrice had confirmed. He laid it out factually, without editorializing, and when he was done, he just looked at me and waited. I could see in his eyes that he had already worked out what it most likely meant, but he was giving me the space to get there myself, and he was doing it with a maturity that made my chest ache because no 19-year-old should have to deliver this kind of news to his father. I sat down on the cold concrete floor of the garage and stared at the pegboard wall where my tools were hanging, and I felt the world tilt sideways. Caleb sat down next to me. He did not say anything. He did not need to. We both understood what this almost certainly meant, and the understanding hung between us like something you could reach out and touch. There are only so many explanations for why a married woman would secretly switch her work schedule and spend her nights somewhere other than where she claims to be. I wanted desperately to believe there was an innocent reason. Maybe she was taking continuing education classes and was embarrassed about it. Maybe she was dealing with a medical issue she had not told me about. Maybe she had picked up a moonlighting shift at a clinic or started volunteering somewhere. But deep down, in the part of my gut that I had spent 44 years learning to listen to, I knew. I knew what my wife was doing on those nights. I just could not bring myself to say it out loud yet, because saying it would make it real, and once it was real, I could not unknow it. The garage smelled like motor oil and sawdust and the faint chemical tang of electrical tape, and those ordinary smells felt obscene in the context of what I was absorbing. Caleb finally said, very quietly, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to find out the truth. All of it. Every detail. Before she knows we know anything." The next morning, after Robin came home from wherever she had actually been and went to bed in our darkened bedroom, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My foreman, a guy named Dale, sounded concerned and told me to take care of myself. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold twice before I touched it, and I made a plan. I needed to verify what Caleb had told me. Not because I did not trust my son. He is the most honest person I know. But because I needed to see it with my own eyes before I took any action that would blow up my life and my family. That afternoon, around 2:30, I drove to the hospital and parked across the street in the lot of the Family Dollar on Glessner Avenue, where I had a clear view of the main entrance. I sat in my truck with the engine off and waited. At 3:12 p.m., I watched Robin walk out of the hospital's main entrance in her navy blue scrubs, her badge clipped to her chest, carrying the same insulated lunch bag she packed every day. She got into her silver CRV and drove away. She was leaving a day shift. In a few hours, she would come home, shower, put on fresh scrubs, kiss me goodbye, and tell me she was heading to the hospital for a night shift that did not exist. I followed her at a distance. She went to Kroger on Lexington Avenue, bought groceries, drove home, and acted completely, flawlessly normal. She talked about how she needed to get some rest before her shift tonight. She asked me how work had been. She smiled at me. I stood in our kitchen, the same kitchen where we had cooked 1,000 meals together, and I smiled back and nodded and said work was fine, and I felt the floor dissolve beneath my feet. I spent the next week conducting my own surveillance, and every evening the pattern repeated with mechanical precision. Robin would shower around 5, put on fresh scrubs, pack her lunch bag, kiss me goodbye at approximately 6:15, and drive away. I would wait exactly 15 minutes, long enough for her to clear the neighborhood, and then I would get in my truck and follow her. The first night, a Wednesday, she drove east on Route 30, turned south on Route 42 toward Lexington, and eventually pulled into the parking lot of an apartment complex called Briarwood Commons on Plymouth Street, about 12 miles from our house on Bowman Street in Mansfield. It was a modest complex, 2-story brick buildings arranged in a U-shape around a central parking area. Robin parked her CRV in the lot, grabbed her bag, walked to a ground floor unit, and let herself in with a key. Not a knock on the door, not a buzzer, a key. She had a key to someone else's apartment. I was parked 3 rows back in the visitor section, gripping my steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, and I photographed the building, the unit number, apartment 114, and Robin's car sitting in the lot. I stayed until 11 p.m. The CRV did not move. The lights inside the apartment stayed on, dim and warm behind closed blinds. At 11 I drove home because I could not sit there any longer without doing something I would regret. I set my alarm for 5:45 a.m. and was back at Briarwood Commons by 6:15. At 6:48, Robin walked out of apartment 114, looking exactly the way she looked every morning when she came home. A little tired, a little rumpled, carrying her bag, and she got in her car and drove home to eat the breakfast her husband had faithfully prepared for her. I followed the same pattern for 4 more nights over the next 2 weeks, spacing them out so Robin would not notice my truck missing from the driveway on consecutive evenings. Every single night was identical. Robin drove to Briarwood Commons, let herself into apartment 114, and stayed the entire night. On the 3rd night of my surveillance, a Friday, I watched from my truck as Robin arrived at the apartment at approximately 6:40 p.m., and about 25 minutes later, a white Richland County EMS ambulance pulled into the parking lot. A man in a dark blue paramedic uniform stepped out of the ambulance, locked it, walked to apartment 114, and went inside without knocking or waiting, the way someone enters their own home. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair cropped close, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who was strong and knew it. I photographed the ambulance, the unit number painted on the side, the man walking to the apartment, and the timestamp on every image. Over the next few days, I cross-referenced the ambulance unit number with the Richland County EMS fleet roster, which was publicly available on the county website, and I identified the man as Drew Langford, age 39, a paramedic with Richland County EMS, who worked the rotating schedule and regularly transported patients to the Ohio Health Mansfield emergency room. That was how they met. He delivered patients to her ER. She treated the patients and apparently treated the paramedic too. I had the name, the face, the address, the ambulance number, and a growing collection of date-stamped, geotagged photographs. I was building a case, and I was doing it with the same methodical precision I brought to every electrical job, because I knew that every piece of evidence I gathered now would matter when this went from my garage to a courtroom. On October 8th, I called a private investigator named Tucker Bowman, a 52-year-old retired Mansfield police detective who had spent 26 years on the force, 14 of them in the Detective Bureau working robbery and fraud cases, before retiring and opening Bowman Investigations out of a small office on 4th Street in downtown Mansfield. I found Tucker through a recommendation from a coworker at Donovan Construction, whose brother had used him in a custody dispute the previous year. Tucker charged $75 an hour plus expenses, and I put him on a 20-hour retainer for $1,500, paid from a personal savings account that Robin did not have access to and probably did not know existed. I had opened it years ago to save for a new truck and had kept it funded with occasional overtime checks. Tucker was calm, professional, and entirely unsurprised by what I told him. He said that in 3 decades of police work and private investigation, infidelity cases were the most common type of domestic case he handled, and the pattern I described, the secret schedule change, the established nightly routine, the spare key to the apartment, the paramedic showing up after shift, was textbook established affair behavior. He said the fact that Robin had maintained the deception for 6 months without slipping meant she was confident, comfortable, and not expecting to be caught. That, Tucker said, made his job easier. Confident people take shortcuts. Comfortable people stop looking over their shoulders. He began his own independent surveillance within 48 hours. Tucker's work over the next 2 weeks was thorough in a way that only a career detective can be. He set up in the Briarwood Commons parking lot on 6 separate evenings, rotating between 3 different vehicles, his own truck, a rented Chevy Malibu, and his wife's minivan, to avoid being noticed. He used a long-lens camera that produced high-resolution images with embedded timestamps and GPS coordinates that would be admissible in any court proceeding. He documented Robin arriving at apartment 114 on all 6 evenings, photographed her entering with her key, photographed Drew Langford arriving between 15 and 40 minutes later, and on 2 occasions photographed the 2 of them leaving the apartment together, once to walk to a nearby gas station for snacks, and once to sit on the apartment's small patio, where Tucker captured images of them sitting close together, Robin's head on Drew's shoulder, his arm around her waist. On October 17th, Tucker followed Robin and Drew on a rare outing. They drove in Drew's personal vehicle, a black Ford F-150, to a restaurant in Ontario called Salvatore's Italian Grill, where Tucker secured a table 2 rows away and photographed them holding hands across the table, sharing a bottle of wine, and kissing when they thought no one was watching. Tucker also pulled public records on Drew Langford and found that he had been previously married to a woman named Tricia Langford, divorced in 2022 after 5 years of marriage, no children, with the divorce citing irreconcilable differences. Tucker spoke to a former colleague at the Mansfield Police Department who knew Langford professionally from EMS calls, and this colleague mentioned that Drew had a reputation as a guy who always had something going on and had been involved with at least one other hospital employee, a respiratory therapist, in 2023. Tucker delivered his full written report to me on October 22nd in his office on 4th Street, and reading it was like swallowing glass. The report was 47 pages long, including photographs, surveillance logs, financial research, and background information. It confirmed everything I already knew and added layers of detail that made the betrayal feel even more calculated than I had imagined. The lease on apartment 114 at Briarwood Commons was in Drew Langford's name, signed on February 14th, Valentine's Day, a detail that felt like a deliberate cruelty, at a monthly rent of $825. The lease date aligned precisely with the month Robin had requested her shift change at the hospital. Tucker had documented Robin entering and leaving the apartment on 15 separate occasions across 3 weeks of surveillance, including my own initial observations and his independent confirmations. He had captured the restaurant photographs showing physical intimacy, and he had obtained banking records through legal channels that he did not elaborate on but assured me were court admissible, showing that Robin had been making cash withdrawals of $200 to $300 every week from an ATM on Lexington Avenue in Mansfield. These withdrawals had been occurring since approximately March and totaled roughly $7,200 over the 6-month period. I had never noticed them because I did not scrutinize our joint checking account statement line by line. I trusted Robin with the finances the way I trusted her with everything else, which is to say, completely and without reservation, which is to say, foolishly. Caleb was with me when I read Tucker's report. We sat at our kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon while Robin was at her real day shift at the hospital. The shift she actually worked. The one she was paid for. The one she came home from and then pretended to go to again 6 hours later. We went through every page of the report together, father and son, and the photographs were the hardest part. Not the ones of Robin entering the apartment. Those were clinical, evidentiary, almost abstract in their documentation of a door opening and closing. The hardest ones were from Salvatore's. Robin laughing at something Drew said, her head tilted back the way it tilted when she found something genuinely funny. Robin's hand on Drew's arm, her fingers curled around his forearm with casual possessiveness. Robin looking at Drew across the table with an expression I recognized because it was the same expression she had worn on that bench at Kingwood Center Gardens in 2003 when she was 20 years old and looking at me. Caleb pushed back from the table and walked to the kitchen window. He stood there for a long time with his back to me, his shoulders rigid. When he turned around, his eyes were red, but his voice was absolutely steady. He said, "She has been lying to both of us. Every single day. She looks us in the eye, and she lies." I nodded. He said, "What's the plan?" And that was the moment I realized my boy had become a man. On October 24th, I met with a family law attorney named Naomi Reese at her office on Park Avenue West in downtown Mansfield. Naomi had been practicing divorce and family law in Richland County for 18 years and came recommended by Tucker, who had worked with her on multiple infidelity and custody cases. Her office was small but organized, every file in its place, every shelf labeled. I brought Tucker's complete investigation file and spread it across her conference table. Naomi reviewed everything with the kind of measured, professional detachment that told me she had seen this exact scenario play out hundreds of times across thousands of pages of evidence and testimony. She was not shocked. She was not sympathetic in a soft way. She was precise, competent, and clearly very good at her job. And that professionalism was exactly what I needed because I was holding myself together with willpower and caffeine and not much else. Naomi explained Ohio divorce law to me clearly and without sugarcoating any of it. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, she said, not a community property state. That means marital assets are divided in a way the court deems fair, which might be 50-50 or might not, depending on a dozen factors including the length of the marriage, the earning capacity of each spouse, the contributions of each spouse, and, critically, whether either spouse dissipated marital assets during the marriage. Naomi walked me through my options with the precision of someone laying out a wiring schematic. Option 1 was a no-fault dissolution under Ohio Revised Code Section 3105.63, which would require mutual agreement on property division, would not involve a trial, and would be faster and cheaper, but might not fully account for Robin's financial misconduct. Option 2 was a fault-based divorce under Ohio Revised Code Section 3105.01, citing adultery as grounds, supported by the full weight of Tucker's investigation. Naomi said the evidence we had, the surveillance photographs, the documented schedule deception, the financial trail of cash withdrawals, was among the strongest she had seen in an adultery case in Richland County. A fault-based filing would give us significant leverage in negotiations, particularly regarding the dissipation of marital assets. Under Ohio Revised Code Section 3105.171, subsection F, a court conducting an equitable division of marital property must consider the dissipation, destruction, or hiding of assets by either spouse. The $7,200 in cash withdrawals Robin had made to fund the affair was clearly dissipation, and Naomi said she expected to find more once formal discovery began. She estimated my total legal costs for a contested divorce at between $8,000 and $15,000, depending on how aggressively Robin and her attorney chose to fight, and she required a $5,000 retainer to begin work. I wrote the check that afternoon. Naomi's immediate advice was to secure my financial position before Robin had any indication that the ground was shifting beneath her. Over the next 48 hours, I executed a checklist that Naomi had prepared. I opened a personal checking account at a different branch of Mechanics Bank on Main Street and redirected my direct deposit from Donovan Construction to that account. I photographed and photocopied every financial document in our home office. 3 years of joint tax returns, mortgage statements for our house on Bowman Street, car loan documents, retirement account statements for both my 401k through Donovan's plan and Robin's 403b through the hospital, credit card statements, bank statements, and the deed to the house. I did this during Robin's actual day shift at the hospital, working quickly and methodically, making copies at the FedEx office on Lexington Avenue, and storing the originals back exactly where I had found them. I documented the balance of every joint account. Our checking had $11,422, our savings had $8,915, and the mortgage on the Bowman Street house had a remaining balance of $91,000 against a current appraised value of approximately $207,000. Naomi now had a complete financial picture to work with, and Robin had no idea that the walls were closing in. The confrontation came on November 2nd, a Sunday evening. I chose the date and time deliberately, after consulting with both Tucker and Naomi. Sunday was Robin's day off. She did not work Sundays at the hospital, and presumably she did not visit Drew on Sundays either, since she was home all day with me and Caleb. I wanted her rested, present, and completely off guard. Caleb was there, seated at the kitchen table with his hands flat on the surface, because he had every right to be there. He had discovered the truth. He had stood by me through the investigation. He had handled the worst discovery of his young life with composure and loyalty that humbled me, and he deserved to be present when we demanded answers from the person who had lied to us both. Robin was at the stove making dinner. Chicken and rice, a recipe she had been making since we were newlyweds, one of the first things she learned to cook after we got married. And she was humming to herself, something by Fleetwood Mac, completely at ease, completely unaware that the life she had been living for the past 6 months was about to collapse. I sat down at the table across from Caleb and said, "Robin, we need to talk." She turned from the stove with a half smile, the kind of expression you wear when you think someone is about to ask what you want for your birthday. I said, "When did you switch from night shifts to day shifts at the hospital?" The smile vanished so fast it was like someone had reached inside her face and pulled a plug. Her expression cycled through 3 distinct phases in about 2 seconds: confusion, then recognition, and then a rapid calculation behind her eyes as she tried to assess how much I knew and how much room she had to maneuver. It was a fascinating and terrible thing to watch. Robin tried to deflect immediately. She said she had just recently been moved to days, that the schedule had been adjusted a few weeks ago, that the charge nurse had made some changes, and she was going to mention it, but it had slipped her mind. I let her talk. I let her build the lie, layer by layer, adding detail and texture the way she had been doing for half a year, because I wanted to see exactly how skilled she had become at it. And she was skilled. If I had not already known the truth, I might have believed her. Her voice was calm, her tone was reasonable, her story was plausible. She was a professional liar, and the realization that I was married to someone who could deceive with that kind of fluency made my skin crawl. When she finished talking, I opened the manila folder that had been sitting on the table in front of me the entire time. I slid the first photograph across the table to her. It showed Robin walking into apartment 114 at Briarwood Commons, date stamped October 3rd. She stared at it. I slid the second photograph, Robin and Drew at Salvatore's Italian Grill, holding hands across a candlelit table. Then the third, Drew Langford in his paramedic uniform, entering the same apartment 25 minutes after Robin arrived, date stamped October 10th. Then the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. I laid Tucker's surveillance logs on the table. 15 documented visits across 3 weeks. I placed the ATM withdrawal records showing $7,200 in cash over 6 months. I placed the hospital rotation schedule that Caleb had first seen in September, showing Robin assigned to day shifts since March 1st. I placed the lease record for apartment 114, signed February 14th. The kitchen table was covered in paper, and the kitchen was so quiet I could hear the rice bubbling on the stove and the second hand ticking on the clock above the refrigerator. Robin's first reaction was to cry. She covered her face with both hands, and her shoulders shook, and she made sounds that might have been genuine grief or might have been tactical distress designed to deflect the confrontation through sympathy. I could not tell the difference anymore, and that inability to distinguish between my wife's real emotions and her performances was perhaps the most devastating consequence of what she had done. 21 years of marriage, 21 years of reading her moods, knowing when she was sad, knowing when she was happy, knowing when she needed space and when she needed a hug, and now I could not tell if her tears were real. She had taken that from me. The ability to trust my own perception of the woman I had shared my life with, gone. She said she was sorry. She said it had been a mistake, the biggest mistake of her life. She said Drew did not mean anything to her. I let those words hang in the air for a moment, and then I responded. I told her that a mistake is forgetting to pay the electric bill. A mistake is taking the wrong exit on the highway. What she did was get up every single evening for 6 consecutive months, take a shower, put on scrubs she did not need, pack a lunch bag she would never open at any hospital, lie to my face and to our son's face, drive 12 miles to another man's apartment, spend the night in his bed, and then drive home in the morning and sit at this table and eat the breakfast I had faithfully prepared for her, while telling me stories about ER patients she had not treated on a shift she had not worked. That is not a mistake, Robin. That is a campaign. That is a sustained, deliberate, meticulously planned and executed betrayal that required forethought and effort and a capacity for deception that I never in my life would have believed you possessed. Caleb did not say a word during any of this. He sat at the kitchen table with his jaw set and his hands clasped, and he watched his mother with an expression that I will never forget as long as I live. It was the expression of a young man watching something he loved break apart in front of him, and knowing he could not stop it and should not try. Then Robin turned to him and said, "Baby, I can explain." Caleb's jaw tightened another degree. He said, "You have been lying to Dad every single night for 6 months. You have been lying to me. I work at that hospital, Mom. I saw your name on the day board in September. Do you know what that felt like? To see your own mother's name where it was not supposed to be, and to slowly realize what it meant." Robin reached for his hand across the table, and he pulled it away, not roughly, not violently, but with a deliberate withdrawal that was worse than if he had slammed his fist on the table. She started talking faster now, the way people do when they feel control slipping away. She said it was complicated, that she and I had grown apart over the years, that the marriage had problems she could not talk to me about, that Drew understood her in ways I did not, that she had felt lonely and invisible. I stopped her. I said, "Robin, you never once told me you were unhappy. You never asked to go to counseling. You never raised a single complaint or concern or request. You never said one word about problems in this marriage, not one word. You just decided, unilaterally, to have an affair and to build an entire fake life around it. You changed your work schedule, you obtained a key to another man's apartment. You maintained a 6-month deception involving daily lies to your husband and your son. That is not growing apart. That is not loneliness. That is a choice to betray the people who trusted you most in this world." She had no answer for that. The chicken was burning on the stove, filling the kitchen with the smell of scorched rice, and nobody moved to turn it off. I told Robin, clearly and without emotion, that I had already retained a family law attorney and that she would be receiving divorce papers within the week. Her face changed. The tears dried up as if someone had turned off a faucet, and something harder appeared underneath. A survival instinct, a calculation. The same look I had seen flash across her face at the very beginning of this conversation, when she was trying to figure out how much I knew. She asked if I was serious. I said I had never been more serious about anything in my life. She said we should try counseling first, that she would end things with Drew immediately, that she would do whatever it took to save the marriage, that 21 years had to mean something. I told her that 21 years did mean something. They meant everything, and that is precisely why what she had done was unforgivable. 6 months ago, before she signed a lease on another man's apartment, before she built a nightly routine of deception, before she spent $7,200 of our family's money on maintaining a secret life, 6 months ago, those words might have carried weight. Now they were just more words from a woman who had demonstrated conclusively that her words meant nothing. Caleb stood up from the table and said, "I am going to my room," and he walked out without making eye contact with either of us. Robin and I stood in that kitchen for another 30 minutes, and she cycled through every emotional register: bargaining, anger, blame. She said I worked too much. She said I was emotionally unavailable. She said I spent more time in the garage with my tools than I spent talking to her. I told her that I got up at 5 o'clock every morning to provide for this family, that I made her breakfast every single day for years, that I was present and faithful and honest for 21 years, and if that was not enough for her, then nothing would have been enough, because what I gave was everything I had. Naomi filed the divorce petition on November 5th in Richland County Court of Common Pleas, Domestic Relations Division. The petition cited both no-fault grounds of incompatibility under Ohio Revised Code 3105.01, Subdivision K, and fault grounds of adultery under Subdivision B. Naomi included a motion for temporary restraining orders on marital assets, a request for temporary exclusive possession of the marital home on Bowman Street, and a demand for a full accounting of the dissipated marital assets. Robin retained her own attorney, a man named Greg Kellogg from an office in Ashland, about 20 miles southwest of Mansfield. The next several weeks became a grinding, document-intensive war of discovery and motions that consumed every spare hour I had outside of work and parenthood. Robin moved out of our house on Bowman Street on November 12th, taking her personal belongings, some furniture, and her car to a rental apartment on Grace Street, a one-bedroom unit she leased for $650 a month. Critically, she did not move in with Drew Langford, which I suspected was on the explicit advice of her attorney, because cohabiting with an affair partner during a pending adultery-based divorce would have been legally catastrophic for her position. Caleb stayed with me. He never hesitated on that decision, not for 1 second. Robin called him every day for the first 2 weeks after she moved out, and he answered about half the time, keeping the conversations short, factual, and confined to logistics. He told me later that hearing her voice was hard, but that he could not pretend things were normal when they were not, and pretending would be doing the same thing she did, performing a version of reality that did not exist. The formal discovery phase of the divorce proceedings revealed a financial picture that was significantly worse than I had initially calculated. Beyond the $7,200 in cash ATM withdrawals that Tucker had identified, Naomi's forensic review uncovered several additional expenditures. Robin had been paying $39.99 per month for a prepaid track phone, a burner phone, essentially, since February, a total of approximately $320 over 8 months. She had purchased gifts for Drew Langford totaling over $2,100, documented through credit card statements on a Discover card that she had opened in her name only in January of 25. A card I had no knowledge of and that did not appear on our joint credit report because it was an individual account. The gifts included a Garmin GPS watch at $349, clothing from Macy's at $412, a weekend stay at a bed and breakfast in Mohican State Park at $289, and miscellaneous smaller purchases. Additionally, Robin had been contributing $300 per month toward the rent on Drew's apartment starting in April, a total of $2,400 over 8 months. When Naomi tallied everything, The total dissipation of marital assets attributable to Robin's affair came to approximately $12,320. For a family earning a combined $119,000 per year, that amount represented more than 10% of my entire annual salary. Money that had been earned through my labor and Robin's labor for the benefit of our family, and that Robin had unilaterally diverted to finance her relationship with another man. Drew Langford became a ghost during the divorce proceedings. He did not appear at any hearing, did not file any motions, did not submit any statement or testimony. His name appeared in the court documents as the co-respondent in the adultery allegation, but he played no active role in the proceedings. According to Tucker, who maintained a casual watch on the situation as a professional courtesy, Drew had started seeing a new woman, another healthcare worker, this time from a hospital in Ashland, by early December, less than 6 weeks after the affair with Robin was exposed. That single piece of information told me everything I would ever need to know about what Robin had meant to Drew Langford. She had been willing to destroy her 21-year marriage, sever her relationship with her son, dissipate more than $12,000 in family money, and build a 6-month architecture of daily deception for a man who moved on to the next woman in a month and a half. When I mentioned this to Robin during one of our few direct conversations in November, a brief exchange during a property handoff at the Bowman Street house, she said nothing, but the expression that crossed her face was something I will carry with me permanently. It was not anger or denial. It was the look of someone who has just realized, in a single awful moment, that the thing they sacrificed everything for was worth nothing at all. The divorce was finalized on February 18, 2026. Following a contested hearing before Judge Leonard Hawkins in Richland County Court of Common Pleas, Domestic Relations Division. The hearing lasted 1 full day. Naomi presented the evidence methodically. Tucker's surveillance photographs and logs, the hospital rotation records confirming the 6-month schedule deception, the financial documentation showing $12,320 in dissipated marital assets, Robin's own deposition testimony in which she admitted under oath to the affair with Drew Langford, the schedule change, and the nightly deception. Robin's attorney, Greg Kellogg, attempted to minimize the dissipation by arguing it was a relatively small percentage of total marital assets and that both parties had contributed to the breakdown of the marriage through emotional neglect. Judge Hawkins was respectful but unmoved. He noted in his ruling that the evidence showed a sustained and deliberate pattern of deception, and that the dissipation was not incidental but systematic. The court ordered a 55-45 division of marital assets in my favor, reflecting the dissipation and the circumstances. Our house on Bowman Street, purchased in 2008 for $162,000 and now appraised at $207,000, was awarded to me. Robin received her equity share of approximately $47,000 from the house, paid from a refinancing of the mortgage. Robin's 403B retirement account and my 401k were divided by qualified domestic relations orders. No spousal support was awarded to either party, which Naomi said was appropriate given our similar incomes and the fault findings. Each party was ordered to bear their own legal fees. My total out-of-pocket cost for the investigation and divorce: Tucker's fees at $2,350 for his hours and expenses, plus Naomi's legal fees of $11,950, came to $14,300, which I paid from savings and a small hardship loan against my 401k. The weeks immediately following the finalized divorce were, in some ways, harder than the months of investigation and legal proceedings that preceded them. The hard part was not the paperwork or the financial restructuring. Naomi had handled those matters with professional efficiency, and everything was in order. The hard part was the silence. The house on Bowman Street, which had been full of Robin's presence for more than 20 years, her voice on the phone, her laughter at the television, her footsteps in the hallway at 7:30 in the morning, the sound of her humming in the kitchen, the way the bathroom smelled like her shampoo after her shower. was now quiet in a way that had physical weight. I had lived with another person for 2 decades, and the absence of that person left a void that could not be filled by turning on the radio or leaving the television on for background noise. I slept poorly. I ate erratically. I went to work at Donovan Construction every day because electricians do not get the luxury of falling apart on a job site where 240 volts will stop your heart if you lose concentration for even a moment. I did my job, I did it well, and I came home to a house that echoed. Caleb was there, and his presence was the thing that kept me upright. He cooked dinner on the nights I could not bring myself to stand at the stove where Robin used to hum Fleetwood Mac. He cleaned the house without being asked. He sat with me on the front porch on Saturday mornings with 2 cups of coffee and talked about his anatomy class or a patient he had helped transport at the hospital or the Cleveland Guardians roster changes. Anything to put sound into the silence. In the first week of March, at Caleb's quiet but persistent suggestion, I made an appointment with a therapist named Dr. Eve Blackwell, a licensed clinical psychologist with a practice on Lexington Spring Mill Road in a professional building near the Ontario town line. Dr. Blackwell was 58 years old, with gray-streaked hair and reading glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck, and she specialized in relationship trauma, grief counseling, and what she called identity reconstruction after intimate betrayal. Our first session lasted 90 minutes and cost $160, of which my insurance through Donovan Construction covered $100. Dr. Blackwell was the first person who said something to me that I desperately needed to hear, that the grief I was experiencing was not simply about losing Robin. It was about losing the version of my life that I had believed was real. For 21 years, I had lived inside a narrative. Good marriage, faithful wife, stable home. And the discovery of the affair had not just ended the narrative. It had retroactively rewritten every chapter. Every night, Robin had supposedly been at the hospital. Every morning, I had made her breakfast and listened to her stories about ER cases. Every time she had told me she loved me while maintaining a secret parallel life with another man. All of those memories, which had once been the foundation of my sense of self and my sense of home, were now contaminated. Dr. Blackwell called it retrospective betrayal trauma, and she said it was one of the most psychologically destructive aspects of long-term infidelity because it does not just destroy your present and your future. It reaches backward through time and destroys your past. Dr. Blackwell and I met every other Thursday through March and April, and those sessions became an anchor in a life that often felt anchorless. She helped me understand something that I had been resisting, that while Robin's betrayal was entirely Robin's responsibility, my relationship with myself needed attention that I had been deferring for decades. For 21 years, I had defined myself almost exclusively as Robin's husband and Caleb's father. As one half of a unit, a provider, a steady presence. Without the marriage, I was forced to confront the question of who Jesse Caldwell actually was as an individual, separate from his roles and obligations. Dr. Blackwell helped me see that I had been so focused on stability and routine, getting up at 5, going to work, making breakfast, maintaining the house, paying the bills, that I had confused the performance of a good life with the experience of a good life. I had been going through the motions so diligently that I never stopped to ask whether I was happy, whether I was growing, whether I was actually present in my own existence, or just keeping the machinery running. This was not Robin's fault. This was my own long-neglected homework. Her response to whatever unhappiness she felt, the lying, the affair, the sustained deception, was inexcusable and entirely her own moral failure. But my willingness to cruise on autopilot without ever checking the instruments was something I needed to own, not as blame, but as information that would shape whatever came next. Caleb and I rebuilt our daily lives in that house on Bowman Street throughout the spring of 26, slowly and deliberately, the way you rebuild anything that has been damaged, one careful piece at a time, testing each repair before moving to the next. Caleb continued his coursework at North Central State and kept his orderly position at Ohio Health Mansfield. Though he had transferred from the ER to the orthopedic floor in November, to avoid encountering his mother during her day shifts. He told me that seeing Robin at work was too disorienting. In the hospital, she was Nurse Caldwell, competent and respected and professional, and that image could not coexist in his mind with the woman who had lied to their family for 6 months. He needed physical and emotional distance to process the contradiction, and I respected that completely. Robin, to her credit, did not fight for the house or attempt to manipulate the situation with Caleb. He was 19 and legally an adult and could make his own decisions about where to live and whom to see. She called him once a week, and he gradually began answering more regularly, though their conversations stayed on the surface: his classes, his work, the weather. Nothing that approached the territory of what had happened. I did not interfere with that relationship, and I never spoke negatively about Robin in Caleb's presence. Whatever she had done to me, she was still his mother, and the bond between a parent and child is not mine to damage. By mid-April of 26, I had settled into what I could recognize as a new life, different from the old one in ways that were both painful and occasionally unexpectedly freeing. I went to work at Donovan Construction. I came home. I saw Dr. Blackwell every other Thursday. I mowed the lawn on Saturdays, and I was slowly, carefully, learning to inhabit the world as a single man for the first time since I was 23 years old. The acute anger had faded over the months to something duller and more manageable. Not forgiveness, because I was not there yet and might never arrive, but a kind of weary acceptance that what had happened, and that the only variable I controlled was how I responded to it going forward. Tucker Bowman, the private investigator, had become an unlikely friend. We met for coffee on Saturday mornings at a place called Relax, It's Just Coffee on North Main Street. And Tucker told me stories from his 26 years on the Mansfield police force. Cases that were darker than mine, cases that were stranger, cases that reminded me that pain and betrayal are not unique to any one person, but are woven into the fabric of human experience. Naomi Reese checked in periodically to make sure Robin was honoring the financial terms of the divorce decree, and she was. Every payment on time, every obligation met, which was either a sign of genuine accountability or a reflection of her attorney's clear instructions. I did not particularly care which. Caleb said something to me in late March that I think about every single day. We were on the back porch, the one that looks out over the small yard with the oak tree I strung lights in when he was 10, and the sun was setting over the rooftops of Bowman Street in bands of orange and purple. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "Dad, I am glad I was the one who found out. Because if I had not seen that rotation board, if I had not covered Jerome's shift that Tuesday, you might have gone on for another year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5, living inside something that was not real. And you deserve to live inside something real." I looked at my son, this 19-year-old kid who earned $14 an hour pushing wheelchairs, who went to community college, who had handled the worst family crisis imaginable with more courage and composure and simple human decency than most adults twice his age could manage, and I felt something that I had not felt in a very long time. I felt grateful. Not for what had happened, but for the fact that I was not alone in it. The marriage had failed catastrophically, but the family had not entirely, not irreparably, because Caleb and I were still standing, still together, still finding reasons to sit on the porch and watch the sun go down. We were still building something, even if we did not yet know what shape it would take. I will not pretend there is a neat ending to this story, because real life does not arrange itself into clean resolutions the way fiction does. There is no dramatic moment where everything clicks into place and the music swells and the credits roll. There is just the slow, unglamorous work of waking up every day and choosing to move forward. Robin is still a nurse at Ohio Health Mansfield, still working day shifts, still living in her apartment on Grace Street. Drew Langford transferred to a different EMS district sometime in January, and I have not heard his name spoken aloud since the divorce hearing. Caleb and I are still in the house on Bowman Street, still figuring out how a 2-person household works when it used to be 3. I still make breakfast every morning: eggs, toast, coffee. Though now it is just for me and my son, and the empty chair at the table where Robin used to sit does not ache the way it did in February. Though some mornings I still catch myself reaching for a third coffee mug before I remember. I am 44 years old. I am divorced. I make $57,000 a year running wire and bending conduit for Donovan Construction, and I am more honest with myself than I have ever been in my life. That honesty is uncomfortable sometimes, but Dr. Blackwell was right. It is the kind of discomfort that heals something instead of hiding it. And if I have learned anything at all from this experience, it is that the truth, even when it arrives through your 19-year-old son on a random Tuesday in September at a hospital where he was covering someone else's shift, is always, always better than the most comfortable lie. Justice had been served. The guilty were punished. The innocent were healing. And we had made it through, together. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. We will see you in the next one.